Man, what a week it's been, huh? I think it's time we all sat down, relaxed, and had a gander at our favorite silly little comfort show about cooking. Oh. Directed by Hideyuki Satake, who also did episode 1, and with storyboards by Nobutoshi Ogura, an industry veteran who hasn't done storyboards in 6 years, Dungeon Meshi episode 11 set a new bar for excellence for this show. So come with me as I quickly break it down, compare it a little bit to the source material along the way, and tell you why this is my new favorite episode of the series, maybe my favorite episode of this entire season. And if you end up liking the video, then like the video. This one also adapts 3 chapters from the manga, but unlike at the start of the show when every chapter was its own episodic adventure, these ones are continuations of one larger story, as well as being mostly action, which goes by a little faster than dialogue when animated. I was a little surprised that the dragon fight took such little time, but it worked out really well. The dragon's eyes in episode 1 were orange, and now they're this yellowish green color. I like the color contrast of this version better, but that's kind of weird that it changed. Might have caused some eagle-eyed viewers to think that this is actually a different dragon. Here's an interesting shot that I wouldn't have expected to see in a Trigger show. The simulated camera speeds down this dark corridor before emerging into a fully 3D environment to make this sharp right turn down the stairs. It's not like Studio Trigger never uses 3D animation or environments. They've obviously made their fair share of 3D mechs, but when they do use 3D animation, it tends to have this highly stylized geometric quality to it. This shot, on the other hand, looks more like something you'd see from Studio Mappa, who, since their first foray into it with Dorohedoro, which, by the way, I made a video about, you should go watch it after this one, have used highly realistic 3D environments to allow for more free use of camera movement, another storytelling tool to add to their repertoire. It's interesting to see Trigger branching out into different styles with this show. Like I mentioned last time, slower movements can be just as impressive and accentuate the faster ones by contrast. And while the forms aren't quite as rock solid in this cut as they were in that one that introduced the dragon, which is particularly noticeable in the ridges above its eyes, also while scrubbing through this, I just noticed a coloring error in this one frame. These 10 frames leading up to the action build tension before the release of the fire breath, and it's the slow, deliberate movements that make the dragon so intimidating. And once the fire does erupt, a plethora of effects like bloom, blur, and super aggressive heat distortion over these ultra contrasty frames sell the danger of the fire. I don't have confirmation for this, but I'd be willing to bet that this is another cut from Kai Ikarashi, with all the same hallmarks of his style as that very similar, insane, low-angle tracking shot from episode 8. The exaggerated low angle of the camera, the characteristic way he stylizes Chilchuk's face and movements, which other animators seem to be taking notes on, this foreshortened pinhead look for Laios, and the way that the absolute consistency from drawing to drawing is less important than creating appealing motion that feels stylish but real at the same time. I love how each character reacts in a different way here based on their personality. Chilchuk immediately bursts into frantic movement, tripping over his feet. Senshi immediately goes for the frying pan and starts running in this business-like way, and Laios takes a couple tentative steps back while still looking at the dragon before finally starting to run. Even as he sort of instinctively flinches here and winds up to start running, he's still transfixed by the dragon. And the same Kai Ikarashi style goes for this cut, which also reimburses us for last episode with a blink and you'll miss it anime original Senshi panty shot, and another. They rearranged the geography of this scene a bit so that Marcel is now standing directly on top of the bridge instead of off to the side, which is perhaps a bit risky, but makes her feel more involved in the scene and allows for this incredible slow motion shot of the roof falling out from under her feet. The animators didn't have to fully animate the dragon's tongue clicking to ignite its flames like this. It's not shown in this much detail in the manga, but the fact that they did makes this really unpleasant to look at in the best way, and contributes to the impression that all these mythical creatures, including the dragon, are actually animals with real anatomy. If you take a low-level drawing class, you'll probably at some point do a blind contour drawing, where you draw something without taking your eyes off it, never looking at your paper, just following the outlines or contours of the object with your eyes. This teaches your brain to reproduce exactly what you see rather than jumping to pre-existing symbols in your head. While this feels like the conceptual version of that, the way the show presents its monsters, this isn't a symbol of what a dragon is supposed to be. This is a creature that's that's been built from the ground up with an anatomical perspective. The pacing slows down a little during this discussion to give you some respite from the excitement, and I love how they sprinkle these crazy smear frames liberally all over this sequence before juxtaposing them with this highly detailed but completely still and silent shot that puts the minuscule scale of the knife back into the context of the gargantuan monster. Also, check out that bumpy texture on the dragon's skin. This crazy scribbly painted frame by Sho Oi, like the earlier one of Senshi holding his apparently mithril kitchen knife, is a really interesting, creative, and impressionistic way to re-establish the threat and jump back into the action. And the generous use of dark black shadows matches well with the way that the dragon has been consistently depicted throughout the episode. This is such a great little bit of character acting when Marcel twists her staff anxiously while the rest of the team gets ravaged off screen. And there are plenty more details like this that I'm not able to get to, because if I did, I wouldn't be able to get these videos out in a relatively timely manner. In this episode, basically every shot is worth noting in some sense, and I love seeing which parts stood out to you guys in the comments, so keep the discussion going down there. There are several really cool uses of fully animated 2D backgrounds in this episode, but my favorite has to be this insane shot by Ichigo Kanno, which conveys the extreme distance and drama of Senshi throwing Kensuke to Laios. Kanno takes some extreme liberties with the human form and character designs, which some people may not like, and admittedly, if you pause on any individual frame, it'll probably look pretty batshit insane. And further admittedly, Marcel didn't quite look like herself during some of Kanno's cuts in the Undine fight. But this is a moment of intense exertion for Senshi, already on the precipice of death. And I think these crazy, loose, exaggerated drawings convey the extreme energy and stakes of this moment. Like how his nose gets so scrunched up mid-throw that it looks like a shriveled up rutabaga that you left on your counter for 9 months. Animation is about conveying feelings, not objective reality. Though I will say that the foreshortening in this frame doesn't really work, and it ends up looking like he's holding a tiny little toy sword, and it would have made more sense anyway to have the sword fling out to the left, trailing behind his hand, especially considering the trajectory it takes in the frame immediately after this one. Also, look at Chilchuck's ass here. I know Ichigo Kanno likes to draw things all bulbous-like, but damn. Ichigo Kanno hasn't even been doing key animation for that long and only started rising through the ranks at Studio Trigger with Promare in 2019, but he and Kai Ikarashi are really defining this show's style in the action scenes. This entire sequence is just incredible in so many ways, and Atsushi Yoneda leads the charge with another cut that I'd expect to see in a Mappa show, because Laios' face here looks straight out of Attack on Titan. The air filling his mouth is terrific, and I like how his expression changes from determination to fear as he hurtles toward the camera. And the selective color effect here is a great way to show Laios' altered state of consciousness after surrendering his leg to the dragon's jaws and focusing singularly on getting to the inverse scale. It's also a really creative choice to treat Marcel's magical runes like a long fuse on a stick of dynamite. Classic kitty moment. We don't have a whole lot of time to spend on this flashback, though Laios and Fallen's sibling bond continues to be very cute, particularly the way they both look back and forth in unison here. They did skip over the first scene in which the townsfolk drop some exposition about seeing a dead man in the cemetery, which is completely unnecessary to be honest, but it does have a few panels of the family dogs, which are very cute and which connect to the later line when Laios gets excited about the prospect of a country of talking dogs. Overall, it totally makes sense to cut though. The final third of the episode masterfully balances horror and comedy, ushering in the new tone that has been gradually building over the last few episodes, with small hints towards the horror and brutality that underpin this setting. Nobutoshi Ogura's storyboards really stand out here. Not that they weren't instrumental in the first half too, but with the action scenes dominated by the visions of eccentric key animators, it's not as easy to see the underlying influence of the storyboards. I wasn't particularly familiar with Ogura before, but he's a veteran in the industry, having worked on everything from Evangelion to Kill la Kill. And according to Kevin at Sakuga Blog, he excels at the intersection between horror and chaotic comedy, so his influence here is clear. They take this panel of Senshi quivering in fear at the prospect of Marcel's quick, brash healing magic, and take the opportunity to reflect her face in his eyes and beads of sweat with this crazy fisheye effect, only to then cut back to Senshi reflected in her eye. That combined with the added blood on her hands, Jaws-like music, and this dark shadow covering most of Senshi's face, a scene that was already hilarious becomes horror comedy that segues perfectly into this next section in terms of tone. Trigger handled this tonal shift so well, and I'm really glad they didn't shy away from the gore here. This sequence is really gnarly, and in fact, the anime actually enhances the gut-wrenching tone. This shot of the characters dragging the dragon's stomach out through a human-sized hole in its abdomen was already unpleasant to look at in the manga, but I really didn't need to see that in motion. For the first time, there's actually no cooking whatsoever in this episode, and don't worry, there will be plenty more cooking to come, but these 3 chapters in a row with a whole lot of dungeon and no meshi mark a shift where this is no longer just a series of episodic excuses to get creative with monster meat. If anything, the equivalent of the cooking montage in this episode would be the characters slicing and sifting their way through the dragon's innards to search for whatever is left of their dead friend. It's shocking in a way, but at the same time completely consistent with the themes that have been established so far. The characters are wacky and silly, and the action is bombastic, but this series has never shied away from the harsh realities of nature.
I see only the overwhelming indifference of nature.
The shot that's going to be burned into my brain for quite a while is anime original and very simple. Having just watched an adorable early bonding moment between Laios and his beloved sister, this almost point-of-view shot through the empty eye sockets of her lifeless skull is downright horrific. And while this panel was originally a shot of the whole cast with Laios doing a sort of to be or not to be pose with the skull, the choice to simplify it down to its basic elements, just a basic shot reverse shot with haunting detail in the ridges and blood stains on the skull, only amplifies the impact of this moment. Oof. Okay, this was a truly amazing episode. It's got the comedy, it's got the action, it's got the existential horror, and it balanced those elements perfectly, knowing when to pile on the extravagant, stylized action comedy, when to pull back and give you a breather, and when to lean into a more realistic style for moments that legitimately gave me chills. And the animation quality was stellar the entire way through, without a single moment that felt unpolished. This is Dungeon Meshi at its best, and it's really just begun. I can't wait for the next episode. Will Marcel be able to revive Fallen with just a pile of half-digested bones? And if the dragon was the big bad up until this point, what threats could possibly lie even deeper in the dungeon? If you want to catch my next breakdown, there's a little subscribe button and a bell down there that'll help you out with just that. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.